Welcome into the 16 Sports Extra podcast. I'm Jackson Neal. That's Sabrina Hoover. Coming back at you after a little bit of a break, but with some big news coming out of the Notre Dame women's basketball team.
Yeah, I think the biggest elephant in the room right now is all the transfers with Notre Dame women's basketball. But I do want to start saying, you were in Birmingham, Alabama. I know, you witnessed Notre Dame losing to TCU 71-62 in the Sweet 16, fourth consecutive year that they have not made it. I think, Ivy has not made it to the Elite Eight. Another year where they fall in the Sweet 16. Just like your thoughts on that game just a little bit since you were there.
Exactly. I mean, it was such a tough game to watch, as in, if you're rooting for Notre Dame or if you're looking at it from Notre Dame perspective. A game where Notre Dame, I think, had more talent on that floor. The problem was Sedana Prince, just 6'7". She's so big. She's so physical in the middle. Notre Dame didn't really have an answer for her. To be fair, I don't know how many teams across the country would have an answer for her. Haley Van Lith, I mean, she's an incredible playmaker, but she was hitting some threes that game. Notre Dame was ice cold shooting, just not the result you mentioned there. The fourth straight Sweet 16 they have lost in. Ivy's not made it to the Elite Eight. The last time the program made it to the Elite Eight was 2019. But of course, the big thing that everyone thought this year was going to be different was a number one ranking that they had earlier this season. Number one in the country ranking they had at one point. But as we all know, the end of the season did not go right. And then now I think it's time to address this, Sabrina. What has gone on since that loss? That was on Saturday.
A lot has changed since Saturday.
Even since Monday. So
seriously.
On Monday night, we got the report that Olivia Miles is entering the transfer portal. This came from ESPN's Shams Charania. He reported that she is not going to WNBA draft, as many expected. She is going to the transfer portal, and the way his report made it sound, she's not coming back to Notre Dame. Because I know whenever you go into the portal, there's always a chance to come back, but at this point, it sounds like she is leaving South Bend. Before we jump too far into that, I do want to throw it to an interview we did with her, a little bit of a soundbite she had from Saturday. This is what she said.
This is after the game?
Right after the game.
I haven't. I don't know. I still am thinking about what I want to do. I'm leaning towards the draft, but, tomorrow I might wake up and be like, I want to come back. So it just changes every day. I mean, I've heard a lot about it. I've also heard that the CBA most likely won't affect rookies all that much. So I'm hearing two sides of it. Ultimately, I love college. I think I've outgrown it a little bit, though. So that kind of makes my decision tougher to stay. But it's comfortable. It's a place where, you have security. The W's more, the volatility is up and down. So I don't know. I'm deciding between a bunch of factors. And CBA is definitely one of them. But, I'm taking it day by day.
So right there, you hear her mention the CBA. What she's referring to there is the WNBA's collective bargaining agreement. That's between the players' union and the owners and everybody. Decides how much money the players make. There's been some talk right now that the WNBA CBA is going to be renegotiated soon. As we know, there's a lot more interest in the league, so they're expecting higher payouts. But it could affect play, it could affect games, it could affect just the payment of players in the next year or so. So that's what she's kind of referring to there.
And I think it's really interesting what she says about, college being comfortable, right? And like she was saying, I don't know, I could wake up the next day and have a different answer. I just think it's very interesting because a lot of players that hit the transfer portal, it's for various reasons, of course, but the fact that she kind of hinted towards, wanting to stay in college maybe, but the fact that, Notre Dame didn't really come up and being, this is a place that is called home for me, none of those words were said. So it kind of, maybe hinted to what we know now.
Exactly. And you mentioned there, the Notre Dame was the home. She kind of mentioned that, but almost in a negative way. It's comfortable. College is a place that's comfortable.
Right.
I feel like I've outgrown it.
Yes. That's the big word there.
I feel like I've outgrown it. It's like, everyone, loves their hometown, but everyone also sometimes feels, I've outgrown it. It's time to go out to college. Time to go out and move away or something. That's what it sounds like she was saying right there. In the moment, obviously, we were all thinking she was talking about the WNBA because she said that her plan at that point was to go in the draft. But as we know, it's now to enter the transfer portal. And that's huge news on its own. That's really groundbreaking news in terms of women's basketball in general, a player of that caliber deciding, hey, I'm not going to go to the draft. Instead, I'm going to stay in college and I'm going to transfer. It's a pretty big deal. But what's even almost bigger or just as big is what's happened since then. Because that was on Monday night. And then on Tuesday and then yesterday on Wednesday, the transfers just kept on rolling in.
Yeah, we got Kay Koval, Emma Risch, Kylie Watson. Am I missing any? Is that
those are the 4 players in the transfer portal. So it's a lot of the roster.
Yeah. No, definitely. Because I think you even said, what was it, Tuesday? You had like not a countdown, but you were like, okay, we got this many numbers. And now Wednesday, Wednesday, it changed again with the whole Kylie Watson one. Does this, knowing how many players have now entered the transfer portal from Notre Dame, does this raise a red flag for you?
This has to be raising a red flag right now. Anyone you talk to that's a fan of the team, that's connected to the team, recovers the team, this is not what was expected. Now, I want to put a caveat out there.
Right.
There are, I think there's 1,000 or if not close to 1,000 women's basketball players in the transfer portal right now. We saw Indiana, lose 6 players in one day go in the transfer portal. The idea that people are going in the transfer portal is not that crazy. It happens at every single program. I think of a player like Emma Risch right here. She struggled with injuries the past 2 years. Maybe Notre Dame just wasn't the place for her. That makes sense. The thing that's concerning is the lack of players coming back right now for Notre Dame already, and then having a lot of these transfers. Because remember, there are 5 players graduating, including Sonia Citron, Maddie Westbeld, Laitu King, Liza Carlin. Those are all rotation players, and there's plus Sarah Cernugal, a player we all like watching. But those 4 especially, really important parts of this team. Westbeld and Citron, important parts of this program for the past 4 years, they're all gone.
Yeah.
So you already knew going into next year you weren't going to have a lot of options, and then half of those options have left. And with some of those options, Miles, a superstar, Watson, a big contributor last year on the team. She can be a really good player when she's healthy.
Right.
Koval, the number 1 overall center prospect, the number 5 overall prospect in the country last year coming into this season. These are key players.
Yeah, definitely. So now they're down to 4, right, scholarship players for this season, for next season. We look at the biggest name on the team right now, Hannah Hidalgo. Knowing, again, just like you mentioned, Olivia Miles, Maddie West, all these players that are leaving now, Hannah Hidalgo being that true consistent player that's been on this team, but also, has been leading the way. But again, it's a question mark because then you look at, besides her, Cass Prosper, who's kind of played in this year's rotation. You got KK Bransford, who missed the season, but has previously played for the Irish. So it's just going to be, again, it's going to be interesting because then what's next? Notre Dame has to hit the transfer portal now.
Exactly. So that's another thing. A lot of people are asking, I think right now, I don't know about you, Sabrina, but when a lot of people who are following the team just casually are asking, okay, well, there must be a lot of freshmen coming in. No, there isn't.
Yeah.
For 2 straight years now, Ivy has only taken 1 freshman a class. Last year was Kate Koval, and then it made sense because of all the players they had. They had a lot of talent on this year's team. That's what made this loss so disappointing, was because they had so much talent. But it made sense why you only brought in 1, because you had so much talent there. But this year, they're just bringing in Leah Macy, a 5-star, another 5-star from Kentucky. But we saw her on campus during the first 2 rounds of March Madness. She was walking around and with an injury.
Yeah.
So her availability will kind of just see that. Then we also KK Bransford. Yes, she has, she did miss all this season because rehabbing from the injury, but still missed the season rehabbing from injury, and then Prosper and Hidalgo. So it's by only taking one of these players in each of these past 2 freshman classes, and then now having one of them looks to be transferring out.
Yeah.
It's making it really, really tough to, field a basketball team.
No, yeah, and we talked about it too. It's this isn't just any university we're talking about. This is Notre Dame. This is a championship caliber team that can make it to the Final Four, can win a national championship. They had the weapons to do it this year, especially, knowing that, you have Hannah Hidalgo and players like that can really build a team, and you have Ivy, a completely, knowledgeable coach. So as a fan, or even as just anyone out there, you're frustrated because it's you're looking at a team that could make it to, the Final Four and the, to a national championship. And now it's you're starting from zero.
Exactly. A month ago, about a month ago is when we started to see things kind of 5 weeks ago. We started to, the NC State, the Florida State losses. But if you were to go to me 5-6 weeks ago and say, okay, it's Thursday, April 3rd, what are you doing? I'm
Yeah.
probably saying I'm on a flight to Tampa because Notre Dame women are about to be playing in the Final Four there this weekend.
Yeah.
If you told me that they'd have 4 scholarship players at that point, I'd look at you crazy.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to me to think about this. It makes me question a lot of the roster building with only taking 1 freshman a class because, I mean, 4 players. If they had a game tomorrow, they'd have to start a walk-on at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously a lot of programs are dealing with players leaving and everything like that. And there's plenty of players that go out and get in the transfer portal. So it's not like there's not an opportunity to build up the roster.
Right.
But you're looking at the best case scenario, 3 players sticking around from one season to the next. That's the continuity. And one of those players didn't even play the whole season before. So we're just going to have Hidalgo and Prosper as the only 2 players from one season to the next being the continuity. That's what makes it really tough. That's what makes these moves kind of just frankly shocking because everyone thought Notre Dame that this program turned a corner under Ivy.
Yeah.
When they got to be number 1, they turned a corner. This is, I didn't get to the Sweet 16, but this is their Final Four team.
Yeah, and I think we talked about it too in most of these podcasts is, yes, this team went through ups and downs towards the end of the regular season, especially that loss to Duke in the ACC tournament. Stuff like that happens, but it's how you bounce back from that. We talked about them entering, the women's tournament. Okay, this is a new slate. This is a time to really fix the mistakes, go into it headstrong and know that, okay, we've done that in the past, but here's where we're going to start and here's where we're going to get to, the Final Four, just like you mentioned, to the national championship. Something like that is where you rebuild. And the fact that, again, those mistakes were in that TCU game, down the stretch, not really making their shots. And then defensively, the same mistakes they've made in previous games. And it's frustrating because it's like, okay, like that was a time to just, completely revamp this team. And they didn't. So
yeah, we heard on the broadcast, they talked about how after the ACC tournament, going to the NCAA tournament, Ivy had some really tough practices to try to get this team into shape. And it looked like it was doing great. I mean, obviously the first round game against Stephen F. Austin,
right.
Whatever you expect. But that Michigan game,
yeah.
A lot of people, even if you asked me going into that game, I was a little worried because Michigan had the length, they had the shot making.
Yep.
Wasn't an issue at all.
I think they had 16 or 17 turnovers in that game. Michigan did. So.
It looked like, okay, Notre Dame's back. They are back to what they were playing like. And it just seems clearer and clearer that something happened. For some reason, the locker room was lost during that stretch of those losses to end the season. Those couple of losses to end the season. It wasn't even that many, but just those couple of losses. Something just fundamentally shifted, it felt like, within this team because these players that are transferring are players that it's not like, just anybody. These are players that are thought of to be future pieces of this team. Kylie Watson has been around this program and has actually, seemed like a pretty much, like even this year, she was doing the tiny mic stuff. She was on the bench joking around with teammates. Yep. She was a pretty integral part of this team even without playing. Olivia Miles, obviously, really integral part. Kate Koval, yes, her evolution throughout the season on offense could have left some to be desired, but the thought being she's the future, big on the team.
Right.
Emma Rich, has struggled to find her spots. So that makes more sense. But these are, at least 3 of the 4 are players that we thought of as, okay, future pieces of this program. And they're deciding to transfer out. That means that they don't believe in the future. They don't want to be a part of that future. So that's where it's just, there's a problem. We don't know what it is.
Right.
We don't know if it's coaching, whatever, anything like that. We don't know. But we just know that there is a problem because at this point, when there's only 4 players left on your roster, something's wrong. The plan for next, if you had to ask anybody around the program, I don't think they would have, if the part of the plan was beginning of April to only have 4 scholarship players.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's even harder that we're talking about this because then you look at the interviews with that you did with Sony, with Sony Citron. She had such a good interview about her talking about wearing the Notre Dame on her chest and being so proud to be here at this university. You hear those words and you're like, man, she was so impacted. I'm not saying none of these girls were impacted by Notre Dame in a positive light. I'm just saying the fact that, after a game like that, like I think she was feeling all the emotions, especially in that game against Michigan when she knew that was the last time she was going to be at that arena. And it was, she was feeling all those emotions. And then you hear that and how proud she was to be at Notre Dame. And then you see all these players that are leaving. It's like, man, like it's just hard to kind of put into perspective some of these players that felt the impact and some of them maybe that still felt the impact, but, maybe wanted to go a different route. And it's just hard to see, that happen at a university like this.
There was such a great core of a program. I think like with Sony, Maddie Westbelt's another one that when I was talking with her after the game, just visibly upset. I mean, even players like Lai-Tu King and Liza Carlin, who just came in for this year, but joining a program.
Yeah.
Liza was Lai-Tu, both very upset because this means a lot. This really means a lot. And playing for Notre Dame, they said it to me. It means a lot. And it just felt like right now when you only have 4 players in a scholarship, it's tough to have that feeling of a program. That's the thing that I'm kind of getting at, is that to have the feeling of a program, you need a kind of core group of people. When you only have 4 and one of them, isn't even on campus yet.
Right.
It's not really, there's really hard to develop a core right there. And then, I mean, just basketball wise, you got to hit the portal. Like there is, I mean, like obviously, if, as long as Hidalgo, any news or whatever, but like if these are the 4 players that like definitely will be there next year, Macy will see about her injury status, but Bransford and Prosper, good defensive guards / wings, but Hidalgo offensively good guard, but they need size.
Yeah.
They need shot making from the outside.
Yep.
They need other creators. They need backup bigs. Like they need there is the list of actual basketball things you need is very long. And it's not going to be solved by even 3 transfers. I mean, you just need bodies at this point.
Yeah.
4 players. A basketball team, you need to be sitting around 11, 12 to be feeling comfortable. That's 7 transfers right there.
No, yeah. No, and it's kind of, again, it's hard to even put into words because, again, knowing the success that they had in the regular season, the 19-game win streak, we talked about the #1 ranking in the country, all that seems so long ago. It seems like last season. And the fact that we're here today, it's wow, a lot can change in a few months. So.
Exactly. And I think that's just, it's just college sports. I think college basketball especially because at least in college football you have, dozens and dozens of players. So even if 7 transfer out, there's still, 70 other guys.
Right.
When it's basketball, if 4 people transfer, that's, that was half the roster coming back right there.
No, yeah.
So it's so it's definitely felt more in basketball. I mean, we've seen it in men's and women's.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it was DePaul last year. From DePaul men's literally changed their entire roster in the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Now they kind of needed to.
Yeah, right.
They were the 300th best team. It was not a good situation.
Right.
But we have seen this. This is not unprecedented at all, but it's unprecedented for Notre Dame is I think the way to kind of frame this is that yes, we've seen this happen at other programs, but we thought Notre Dame was on this level of a South Carolina, UConn, LSU, UCLA, USC, those types of programs. And right now, you're not really seeing that at those types of programs.
No, and it kind of reminds me of, again, I keep bringing it up, but last time with the Notre Dame NIU loss with football, it's I love how Marcus Freeman talked about it, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. And that could happen to any program, but then talking about women's basketball, knowing the highest of highs they had, and now here we are, the lowest of lows, how fast it can happen. And again, Ivy, she's a great coach. She seems like an even better person when we talk to her in interviews. And I know how much she cares for these athletes and these females on a personal and obviously just an athletic level. And, having a former athlete as a coach and knowing how much success she had at Notre Dame and then now her being a coach at Notre Dame, she's built this, thing of herself here. And then, again, to see it kind of crumble right now, and then how is she going to rebuild it back up, I think is the biggest question for everyone.
This is the tipping point. This is the point. I mean, where it's kind of okay, where do you go from here?
Right.
Is that if Ivy is going to go down as another great coach in Notre Dame history and replicate her success that she had as a player,
right,
this is going to kind of be the tipping point moment where it can go either way. I mean, NIU loss, I think a lot of people were feeling in some way about Freeman with those early season losses, kind of go either way. And obviously we saw which way he went. They went to the national championship game. So it's pretty clear how everyone feels about Marcus Freeman now. But it's for Niele Ivey, it's right now, you can go either way. she can, whatever the roster is next year, it's going to be a roster in her image because she's going to have to rebuild this thing from nothing.
Yeah. And and I'm saying, like, maybe this is like a good thing, like in a way, like that for her as a coach, like this could be a new, level of like, okay, like I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to rebuild it just like you said, like in her image and build it from the ground up, really. And so what is she going to do with it? And she might, I would think like she could prove a lot of people wrong with this, especially knowing a lot of the questions that are coming up and people kind of questioning what's going on with the program. Like she could turn all those down, going into next season. So,
and any doubts you might have about Hidalgo, yes, there were times she struggled throughout this season, taking a lot of shots in these games that they lost and not making them. You can have all these things. Heck, maybe even what was we don't know what's going on, what goes on behind the scenes even. Whatever you have against Hannah Hidalgo, she still was the National Player of the Year frontrunner for most of the year. She's going to finish as one of the top 3 players in the country. She was a first-team All-American for her first 2 seasons. She is a generational talent.
Yep.
And Ivy, as of right now, still has her on her roster.
That is very true.
So if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're thinking, oh my gosh, where do we even go from here? Look, Ivy's feel like she's hit a ceiling of the Sweet 16. She needs to do something different. Maybe maybe this is the drastic change you kind of need. And if you're gonna if you're gonna have one player to build around, in the country, whatever you have against Hannah Hidalgo, she's a player that could legitimately win the Wooden Award next year.
I was gonna say, it would be pretty nice to know that that's the one player that, you know what I mean?
It's yes, okay, was this end of the season a little disappointing? Yes, but she's still just a sophomore and she can still be on a first-team All-American all 4 years of college. Players don't do that. That's a level of talent that just does not come along. So whatever you have against Hidalgo, whatever she needs to change, there are parts of her game I think she needs to change, but she's still an incredible, incredible talent. And having that piece is going to allow Ivy to build something at least. So that's the key right there for this team going forward in the next season. And we'll continue to talk about this team, especially as the transfer portal goes on, because I think over the next week or so, we're going to be getting a lot of steam, or at the very least, like starting to see, okay, all these players are in the portal. Who's Notre Dame at least talking to? Who are they targeting? Because they need to get on it. They need to get on it quick. A lot of options out there, though.
Yeah, and you talked about it. Obviously, it's first for Notre Dame, but this is not rare for many.
It's college
programs.
sports,
it's kind of like our new normal, and it's kind of what you gotta.
That's just how it is. It's like, if think of it like this: all of these players are on 1-year contracts. At the end of any year, they can go.
Yep.
And when someone's on a 1-year contract, they might just decide, let me just test the water. We know Miles is going for sure based off the report. Watson with a do not contact tag.
Right.
That means that she knows where she's going. Miles, Watson, they grew up, they knew each other, so I'm thinking maybe they could go to the same place maybe. But even Koval or Rich, transfer portal, they could always just be testing the waters, come back.
That's
so
true.
So that's another thing as well, is I think in this age of college sports, hasn't happened to Notre Dame that much across really any sports, but especially women's basketball. So it feels weird for Notre Dame fans, but this does happen around the country now, and it's just happening for the first time for Notre Dame.
Yeah, no, I agree. And again, we'll have plenty more updates because just like you said, there's probably going to be a lot going on these next few months.
Sabrina, it's a crazy time. I feel like ever since we started this, the first time we did an episode of this podcast was when they were number 1 in the country.
Yep.
And
things were on the highest of highs. Like they had, what's it called? I always think about the commercials that
yes.
they have now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the highest of highs for them.
I remember seeing all the commercials. Ivy has the other one too, the one with the team as well. It's just, it looked like they were the America's team there for a second.
Yes.
It looked like they were America's team for a second.
Perfect way.
And now another Sweet 16 loss. But we're going to see how they replace the roster.
Yep.
For Sabrina Hoover, I'm Jax Neal. Thanks for watching the 16 Sports Extra podcast.